Well, as I just mentioned, we're able to now talk to the government and in particular the Defence Secretary, John Healey, who joins me. A very good morning to you, Defence Secretary.
Good morning.
A busy bilateral set of meetings over the last couple of days, of course, with the French President Emmanuel Macron. What are you able to announce on the defence side?
You're right, a big day, a summit ahead. It's the first summit with a European ally since the end of Brexit, which is quite extraordinary. But it demonstrates the way that, as a government, we set out this last year to reset relations with key European allies. And France has always been our longest standing ally. We're close on military cooperation. So we'll be announcing new coordination on nuclear cooperation, on research, on exercising, on testing, and coordinating our deterrence in the face of extreme threats that our countries in Europe may face. Increased coordination of our militaries, so a force of 50,000 ready to activate to defend Europe, strengthen NATO, and above all, increased coordination on industrial production, new missile production, increased Storm Shadow production, and support for over 1,600 jobs in the future that will be high-skilled, long-term, high-paid, and the sort of thing that will help defence drive economic growth in this country.
Collaboration on Storm Shadow missiles is obviously great, but I think fair to say that missiles aren't planes, they're not submarines, they're not boats. Has it been established yet in full that the UK can bid for any and every project coming out of EU defence budget spending increases?
No, it hasn't, but we've taken the first important step to strike an agreement that it would be impossible under the previous government between the UK and the European Union, a security and defence partnership. That's the first required step. Now we're negotiating the potential role that Britain can play and the advantage that our industry can get from some of the funding schemes that the European Commission will have to boost European defence.
I guess this is a sort of big picture question kind of linked to all of that. Do you think that the EU and perhaps France in particular undervalue what we give them on the military side, what we're there implicitly or explicitly to do on the defence side for our allies in the EU, who we basically share all common defence ground on, even if we're no longer a member of the EU?
No, on the contrary, the French, and you heard this from President Macron yesterday when he spoke to the joint houses of parliament, say that our two nations share a special responsibility for the security of Europe. They recognise that our two militaries are at the forefront of European nations and that we have to work together to strengthen NATO itself. And that's what's going to be at the heart of the defence and security part of the summit agreement today. Closer in industrial collaboration, closer military collaboration, closer nuclear coordination. And together as two leading European nations, we're stepping up for European security, we're reinforcing our own economies, but we're also strengthening NATO, and in particular the deterrence that we can offer together with allies against adversaries, in particular like Russia, for the future.
I guess implicit in my question is what we get back for it, Defence Secretary. I mean, I think you're right to say that he recognises what they get, but does he get it for free is perhaps the question. And on that note, I just wanted to ask what we would be able to do and you would be able to do as a Defence Secretary if there was a boat leaving our shores, and on board that boat, for argument's sake, was an incredibly high-level target that the security services that you wanted to apprehend. Could you stop a boat leaving our shores?
I'm not quite sure what sort of hypothetical question you're looking to ask me.
Could we stop a boat leaving our shores? Is our defence capability sufficient, our police forces, our coast guards, our navy, to stop a boat leaving if we wanted to?
We absolutely have the powers to patrol our own waters, to keep an eye on any of our adversaries that may be up to no good, and we've seen that in recently from Russian spy ships. We've got the capacity to take out any planes, missiles, boats that may threaten us in extreme circumstances. But rather than try and deal with singular hypotheticals, let me just say we have one of the best militaries in Europe, one of the strongest militaries in Europe. But the increasing threats that we face, the rising nuclear risks that we see, mean that we have to do more, and that's why as a government we've made the commitment to increase defence spending now by a record amount since the end of the Cold War. We'll do that over the next couple of years, and we'll go further in the next Parliament. And we do that to keep the country safe, but we do that also to strengthen our economy, to create the jobs right across the UK that we need for the future.
I totally hear all of that, and I think it's very revealing, Defence Secretary, because it quite clearly implies that if the French wished to stop all of the small boats, they could with great ease, unless their military capabilities are nothing compared to ours.
Well, the small boats are certainly part of the discussions at this summit, and you'll hear more from the Prime Minister and President Macron on that later on. But the discussions are only taking place because over the last year we've been able to establish with the French a recognition that this is a shared challenge, that they are working together with us. And that's the reason that we've seen increased beach patrols, more drone patrols. And last week we saw some of the action of French enforcement officers slashing boats and stopping them in the shallow waters. We want to see more of that. But that combined work with the French is part of the reason we've been able to stop 12,000 crossings already this year. Now we need to go further. Today's summit, I hope, will help us do that. And also the new borders bill that is still in Parliament will give us the powers to do more to smash the smuggling gangs as well in the future. There isn't a simple solution to this, but certainly we can't do it unless we have the ability to work closely with the French and with other European nations. And that's what we've set out to do as a government since the last election in July.
That's all well and good, Defence Secretary, but you've essentially acknowledged that the other way round, we would have the ability to stop the boats like that if we so desired. And maybe we can't blame the EU or the French for letting all these boats depart. And that might well be a reasonable political decision on their part, particularly off the back of Brexit. But they could, based on what you've said about our capabilities, stop most of the small boats overnight.
Well, as a government, we're not interested in blame. We're interested in working more closely together. We're interested in taking the action together that can help reduce the number of small boats coming across, the number of lives also being lost in the Channel. And we're interested in re-establishing the control of our borders that the previous government lost in the recent years.
But I guess just finally on this, and you know, money's tight at the moment, and I know you think very carefully how you spend your money on this in the Defence Department, but are we getting bang for our buck? I mean, you're saying it's not about a blame game, but there's also got to be a decision on if we're spending this money wisely, if at the same time, implicitly, we're defending Europe as well, by the way, and that costs a lot.
On controlling our borders, I think we are getting a better bang for the buck than the previous government. They spent 700 million on the Rwanda scheme. While the Rwanda scheme was in place, more than 80,000 people crossed the Channel in small boats, and we only managed to get, as a country, 4 volunteers out to Rwanda during the entire time. We've axed that scheme. We've redeployed that money into strengthening a new border security command that is building up its strength. We'll put it into implementing the new powers in the Borders Bill when Parliament gives us those sort of counter-terror type powers to deal with the smuggling gangs. And we'll put it into more work with the French as the French step up their enforcement action in the shallow waters. And we want to see more of the drone and beach patrols that they've already started to do as part of the joint work that they've accepted we need to do together. And you'll hear President Macron and Prime Minister Starmer talk more about today as part of the summit.
Just finally, Defence Secretary, Friedrich Merz said yesterday that diplomatic routes to peace in Ukraine were exhausted. Do you agree with that?
Well, I'm not a commentator President or Chancellor Merz may have his views. What I do know is that Chancellor Merz, alongside Keir Starmer, at the NATO Leaders Summit with President Trump, were talking about the importance of a ceasefire, trying to renew an impetus to get Putin to the negotiating table, to hold him to account for saying he wants to talk but keeps away. And we're also working with the Germans very closely to make sure that we can provide Ukraine, alongside other nations, with the military support they need to maintain their fight today.
Defence Secretary, thank you so much for joining me this morning.